Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to go ahead and work on the Chapter 5 study guide. This should be a shorter test, very similar to this study guide that we're going to do today. So first off, the first section, the first four here is you have to solve for the variables. So if I'm looking at number 1, my variable I have to solve for is this x, which means I have to get x by itself. So I don't want to confuse that with what's going on over here. So this is actually our equation, 2x plus 22 equals 12. So I have to get x by itself. So the first thing I have to do before I divide, because that's going to become last, is I have to get x alone. So I have to isolate that variable, which means I have to get rid of this plus 22, which is like a positive 22. So I have to subtract 22 from each side first. I'm gonna go ahead and draw my line. These cancel out, and I'm left with 2x equals 12 minus 22. So that tells me if I have 12 positive and I'm subtracting 22, I know I'm gonna have a negative number. So the trick is you just take 22 minus 12, and that gives us 10, and so my answer will be negative 10 there. But we're not done. I've got one more step left to do. We have to divide by that 2 on both sides. So I end up with x equals negative 10 divided by 2 gives me a negative number. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my answer is x equals negative 5 for that one. All right, for number 2, a question like this is actually really good because later down when we're graphing on this last page here, we have to make sure both of these are in y equals mx plus b form. So number 10 is not in y equals mx plus b form. So this kind of gives us practice for putting it in y equals mx plus b form because we do need to solve for y. So I need y alone. So y, if I kind of take off all of this stuff, is kind of there alone, but the first thing I'm going to do is you have two options here. You can either add y to both sides, so then we have a positive y instead of a negative y, or you can pretend that this is a negative 1. Don't forget, if you have a negative in front of it, it's like a negative 1y. So let's just go ahead and subtract the 2x from both sides. And when I do that, remember that you can't take away an x from just a regular constant or a regular number. So I have to kind of sneak this in front of it right there. So when I do that, I have to make sure that I put it in front, and then I would have a negative 1y on this side equals negative 2x plus 3. So then I am almost done. I just have that negative 1 left over. So, but what we have to do is we have to divide every one of these things by a negative 1. So it's kind of like we're flipping the sign for every one of these things. So we end up with y equals negative 2 divided by negative 1 is just 2x, and a positive 3 divided by negative 1 is actually a negative 3. So that is my answer for that. Last one here, or not the last one, number 3, I am solving for x. And so I noticed that I have x's on both sides. So you're gonna go ahead and make a decision, like, do you take this x over there or take this x over here? Or what I see right away is that I have a 2x over here and I have a 2x over here. So if I subtract 2x from here or subtract 2x from here, I'm gonna be stuck with nothing. These actually cancel out. And so what you have is you have a 15 equals a negative 15. Wait a sec, that does not make sense because 15 does not equal negative 15. So whenever you have something like this and you get rid of your variables and something doesn't equal something, so I'm gonna put a big slash mark through this equal sign because that means not equal to, we can actually say that x is going to be there's going to be no solution to this. So this just does not work. So this is what you have to write for it. You know, it's not going to be 0 because x actually disappears completely. And if you think about it, if you put anything in for x, I mean, we can pick any number we want, 2 or 5 or even 0. What happens is these will cancel out again, and you'll be stuck with the 15 and negative 15. And it'll never equal to that. So no solution for number 3. Finally, for y, it's another good practice question for putting it in y equals mx plus b form, because we have to solve for y again. So I like how y is positive here, so at least later when I divide, I don't have to divide by a negative number. So that's nice. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract the 6x from both sides. And this time I'll put it not under the 10 so you don't get confused, but later when I rewrite this, I'm going to stick it right in front of the 10 there, just like we do in y equals mx plus b form. So now I'm going to rewrite what I have here. I have a 2y on the left side, that's left, equals, I'm going to put that negative 6x first, and then I'm going to add that 10. I guess you could put 10 minus 6x, and I wouldn't count you wrong, but we want to get in the practice of always putting the x in this form. So then I have this 2 attached to the y, and this means 2 times y. So the opposite of 2 times y is dividing everything by 2. So I'm going to divide everything by 2, and I'll rewrite what I have. So y is alone. Negative 6 divided by 2 is actually a negative 3. Then I have to drop down that x. And a positive 10 divided by 2 is a positive 5. So y equals negative 3x plus 5. And that one's done. So once again, all 4 here, we've got x equals negative 5, y equals 2x minus 3, no solution, and y equals negative 3x plus 5. So be sure that you do copy this all down, and that way you'll have a nice study guide for tonight when our test looks very similar to this. All right, next section is our fraction and decimal busters. This one, we have 2 denominators. In this case, we've got 3 and 2. The 5, remember, is going to have a 1 underneath it. So I don't really count that 1. So if we have to count by our 3s and count by our 2s, if you're one of the students who needs to do that, most of you can do that in your head, but sometimes it's good to write it out. So if I usually put the first 5 or so, and then same thing here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, blah, blah, blah. But you'll notice right away that they share this 6. So that's what I'm going to multiply everything by. So times 6 over here, which is like 6 over 1, 6 over 1, and then just 6 here is fine. All right, well, 6 times x on top is just 6x, and 1 times 3 is 3. So really, I have kind of like a 6 divided by 3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2, but I have to put that x next to it. And then I'm adding, we have 6 times x, which is 6x, divided by 2 again. So that's going to be 3, right? And we can't forget about that x next to it. And then 5 times 6 is 30. And I have to combine these 2x plus 3x, and that equals 5x. And then I'm going to, that equals 30. So then next, I am going to divide by 5, and I've got x equals 6. So that is my solution for number 5. And you could always plug that 6 back in to see if it works. And so if I do, that 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 2 plus 3 does equal 5. So that way I know I'm right on that one. Here we have some decimal busters. I like to underline how many decimals I have. So this has 2, this has 1, and this actually has 0. So I'm going to move everything to the right 2 to get rid of those decimals. So if I move it to the right 2 for this one, I just get 2y. Subtract, if I move 2 to the right for this one, I get 150. And then if I move 2 to the right for this one, I actually have to add on 2 zeros. So then I have that. All right, so then I have to add 150 to both sides because I want to isolate that y by itself. So I get 2y equals 1,850. So then what I do is I just, I have to divide by 2 on both sides, and I get y equals 1,850 divided by 2, and that equals 925. So that is my answer. We can plug it back in just to double check to see if we were right, but that looks pretty right to me. So that's the end of part 1 here. The next section will be part 2. So make sure you pause, go back if you have to catch up on some of these things, and be sure you do see me before your test if you have any questions. Put a lot of these things in your I&B if you want to, because remember your I&B is fair game to use, and you can use your calculators tomorrow as long as you show me this work, because if you don't show me work, you're not going to get credit for the entire answer. All right, so on to the second side.